Hey everybody, this is Mary from Always Learning, and today we're going to talk about the science of nostalgia and why it makes us both happy and sad at the same time, because that's kind of a strange proposition. But if you think about this, have you ever heard a song from your childhood and you instantly felt like you were back there, maybe your teenage years, whatever influential times you're thinking back on? You instantly felt like you were back there. Maybe even the smell of an old book, the smell of some perfume, a smell I've heard is usually the strongest of all the senses that can just bring you back into that feeling of nostalgia. Taste of a childhood snack, the way a certain place looks at sunset, that feeling, that sudden bittersweet feeling, that flood of memory. It's nostalgia. And it's a weird one, isn't it? Because it makes us happy and sad at the same time. But why? What's actually going on when nostalgia hits? And why do we love chasing that feeling, even though it kind of hurts sometimes? Let's dive into the science of nostalgia and why we experience it, how it affects our emotions, whether it's actually good or bad for us. What is nostalgia? Well, first of all, really, nostalgia isn't just remembering the past. Nostalgia is an emotional memory. It's not just like, I remember being a kid playing outside and I really miss it. It's where you feel that to your soul almost, right? You feel it in your heart. It's very visceral when you think about it. Psychologists define nostalgia as a sentimental longing for the past, usually for moments tied to personal experiences. It's different from just reminiscing because it carries this unique mix of warmth and ache, like revisiting, for example, a beautiful dream that you know you can't go back to, you can't stay in, it's over. The word nostalgia comes from the Greek words nostos, Nostos, which means homecoming, and algos, Algos, which means pain. So literally, nostalgia means the pain of coming home or returning home. Now, what's happening there with that, linguistics is that's pretty accurate, right? The pain of returning home or knowing that we can't really go home. I have to have the dog. She always has to sit with me when I'm making a video. What's actually happening in our brains when we feel this nostalgia? Nostalgia is basically happening in a way that makes me think of it like a neural time machine. Okay, our brain is creating this activation of multiple parts of the brain all at once, actually, is what's happening. We have, first of all, the hippocampus. That's the brain's memory center that helps us retrieve and relive past experiences. We have the amygdala. Oh, the amygdala, that's where the emotions come in. That's where you get the emotions processed, and that's why nostalgia feels so intense sometimes. The prefrontal cortex. Now, we may think of that, most people know today that their brains don't really develop until we're about 24, 25 years old. And it's the prefrontal cortex that also makes the decisions or helps us make good and bad decisions. And that's why sometimes we make such weird, strange decisions when we're very young and just, before we get to that certain age. It's our prefrontal cortex that's not fully developed. But what does that have to do with nostalgia? Well, the prefrontal cortex also helps us reconstruct memories in vivid detail. Now, in order for us to get vivid detail in our memories, it's not like we have a movie playing in our head that was saved, minute for minute and, scene by scene. It's more complicated than that because our brain, especially here the prefrontal cortex, is trying to help us reconstruct memories, but we have gaps in our memories. And we fill in those gaps with the prefrontal cortex. It makes things seem even more real than they were, even more intense than they were. And this is where it gets kind of interesting, right? Nostalgia also triggers the release of dopamine. Oh boy, do we chase dopamine, especially those of us that have ADD and things like that. Dopamine is the same neurotransmitter that makes us feel pleasure. And that's why nostalgic memories feel so good. Now, one thing we do is we usually remember or fill in the blanks in our favor. Our brain does that for us. Brain's very, it's magnificent. I love neuroscience. But at the time that these nostalgic memories can feel so good, at the same time they can also trigger that melancholy because they remind us that that time is gone. They remind us that it's, a time we can never go back to. We can never be there again, ever. Okay, it's all gone. So it's this mix of joy and longing, a cognitive contradiction that we actually, on some levels, really enjoy experiencing, which again almost sounds like a contradiction, but this whole thing of nostalgia with the happy and the sad being mixed together really is a contradiction. Now, why does then nostalgia make us both happy and sad? There's quite a few reasons. I'll give you a couple. Okay. Number one, we're remembering the past that no longer exists. Okay. Nostalgia brings back a version of the past, but not necessarily the whole truth. Like I said, we fill in the gaps in our brain, and our brains tend to romanticize things in our favor and make us maybe the hero, or sometimes it'll do just the opposite. But sometimes we filter out the bad parts in our brain and amplify the good parts. That's why childhood sometimes can feel so magical, and those summers were so long, and the candy bars tasted better, and ice cream was better, and everything was just, ideal. But it wasn't, because even though we have that nostalgic feeling, if we look back, reality, it's not magical, okay? We probably had, and we did have stress, we had fears, we had bad days, but nostalgia, when it's coming to us in whatever moments that have triggered it, nostalgia kind of gives us a highlight reel. And part of the sadness of nostalgia comes from realizing that we cannot go back and relive those moments. We cannot go back and see things exactly the way they were. And part of us knows that they weren't perfect. Now, number two, nostalgia's tied to who we used to be. Okay, and we're not that person anymore. We're still the same human being, but we have changed. I'm not the same person I was at 15. I'm not the same person I was at 25. I'm not the same person I was at 30. What we feel when we feel nostalgia is we're not just remembering events, we're remembering ourselves at a different point in our lives, in our development. It's a reflection of our past identity that we have to confront with nostalgia. That can be both comforting on some levels, but it can also be a little bit unsettling to realize how much you have changed and you didn't even notice it at the time. And again, have you ever heard, say, an old song? You remember hearing it for the first time, and you feel maybe a strange distance now from that song. You can feel a distance between who you were then and who you are now. That creates a disconnect, right? That's creates kind of another contradiction there. And nostalgia forces us then to realize and recognize change. That no matter how natural change is, no matter how good change can be for us, it always carries with it a little bit of loss. Now, nostalgia, third reason here, is often triggered by contrast. Nostalgia tends to hit hardest when we're feeling disconnected in our present. Most people, according to studies, are likely to experience nostalgia more when they're lonely, when they're stressed, when they're facing uncertainty. I mean, look at the world we live in right now. I mean, all of that. A lot of us are lonely, a lot of us are stressed, a lot of us are facing uncertainty. Just about everybody in one way or another, right? So they say that nostalgia acts kind of as a psychological coping mechanism for us in those times, helping us feel more anchored by reminding us that we have good memories, we've had meaningful experiences. That's why you might suddenly crave 80s music or TV shows or 90s nostalgia of any of that, 80s, 90s, 70s, depending on your age, early 2000s. When the modern world feels like too much, overwhelm, which it does often to a lot of us, the past feels safe, not because it was perfect, but because we already know how it turned out, if that makes sense. Okay? So is nostalgia ultimately good for us or bad for us? Well, the answer is it depends on how we use it. Nostalgia has benefits because it can boost your mood, it can boost your self-esteem for a while. Studies show that nostalgic memories actually make people feel happier and more connected to others. It can reduce stress for a while. Revisiting memories can help calm us down with our anxiety and give us some perspective and look back and see, the good, that we still are here and we've changed, but yes, we do have meaning. We've got social bonds that we can strengthen. Reminiscing, shared nostalgia brings people closer. Okay, that's one thing I think that gets me so interested in the generational thing, is that we have those flashpoint moments in every generation, that the whole generation at that time, those shared memories we can talk about, or you can reinforce relationships and a sense of belonging, something bigger than you, bigger than yourself, right? Things like in the 80s, Live Aid, and raising money for the Ethiopian famine, and Hands Across America, and all these things. If we reminisce, if we reinforce some of these things and we reminisce with people who also went through it, again, it makes us feel connected. If we, on the other hand, dwell on it too much in the past, we dwell on it and we get stuck in the past, that's bad. Because if nostalgia turns into a longing for a time that literally no longer exists, and a us that no longer exist, it can stop us from enjoying the present and the beautiful things that are happening right now in front of us. It can create unrealistic comparisons because we romanticize, like I said, the past. We filter it out through those rose-colored glasses, and it can make the present sometimes feel dull or scary and trap us in some kind of maybe regret cycle. Some people experience nostalgia not only as that longing in a kind of wistful way, but also as a painful reminder of all the missed opportunities, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, as they say, rather than a source of comfort. It depends on the way that you look at it, the way that you use nostalgia. Now, if you use nostalgia in a healthy way, how do we do that? We can embrace it without getting stuck in it if we use it as a tool. It's great to look back. It's great to relive some of the glory moments and some of our wonderful memories, whether they're completely accurate or not. But you can't let it keep you from making new experiences in the present. Share it with others. Again, talk about the nostalgic memories. Talk about things, Gen X, if you're Gen X like I am. Talk about that with other people around your age. Talk about family memories with your families. These things strengthen relationships, build a sense of community, and help you get more perspective on your past in a much bigger way. So instead of just longing for the past, ask yourself, what did I love about that time? And what can I personally do to bring some of that into my present moment? Now, what I'm thinking of when I think of that is maybe, Gen X, we're the ones who really are the last generation that remembers no internet. No internet, okay, for the average person, no internet. And so sometimes we long for that. Before smartphones or before, cell phones in general, we couldn't be bothered. We couldn't be, people weren't always finding us and connecting with us all the time. Sometimes we wanted to be left alone, and that was good. So maybe take some time off from the screens. Give yourself a break. Set some time aside every week or every day or every couple of days, whatever it is you need. If you miss old school music, experiences and so on, do what I've done. I've started collecting vinyl again. Years ago, the hipsters several years ago brought back vinyl. We thought vinyl was gone forever. Me with my giant vinyl collection, I was so upset, but it came back. And I've got a lot of my old collections from when I was a kid in the 70s and then, teenager in the 80s and so on and whatever until vinyl went out. And now I'm getting to buy some of the vinyl records that I couldn't afford to buy when I was a kid. It was great. To go in there I can look at what I have now. I can listen to them on something though that makes it even a little bit better because I have this great turntable. It's Bluetooth. So you're kind of combining the best of both worlds and you're looking at both of them. You're seeing the good in the vinyl and also the good in the modern technology. So you're not getting stuck. See, with nostalgia, nostalgia can be, and that's the danger of it, is it can be a trap, right? It doesn't have to be just a memory. It can be a guide to your inner self and what brings you joy and things that you should try to, make a part of your life when you have a chance. And nostalgia, not as a trap, but as a bridge, is very powerful, very powerful. It reminds us who we are, who we were, what shaped us as we were growing up and as we were becoming, the age we are now. It connects us to our emotions in so many different ways, to our past and to each other. The key is, though, balance. Nostalgia should be and should remain that bridge between the past and the present, not that trap that keeps us locked there wishing, like me, I'm saying this to me, like I keep thinking, oh, the time machine needs to be here now. I want to go back to 1987. Well, what about 1987? Why do I always say that? And then I have to reflect. Oh, wait, that was the first time when I really, really left home for good. And that was the time when I lived in the dorms at San Francisco State University. And I had, so many new experiences. And wow, that was a heck of a year for me in my growth. I was growing up, right? So, I don't need to go back there to be able to see what I've learned and why I cherish those years, but I can't look at that time, particularly, for me again, 1987. I can't take that moment in time and say, I want to go there and live that again. I want to be there. I want to move forward. I have a son. I don't want to lose any of the present trying to live in the past. And I struggle with that. I really do. And I think a lot of us do. Because the next time you feel that wave of nostalgia hit you, whether it's from an old song, a childhood toy, longing for some kind of random, candy that they don't make anymore, and even if they did, it probably wouldn't taste the same to us. Embrace it, feel it, okay? Feel your feelings about that, live through it. Let the nostalgia remind you that the past mattered. You matter, okay? Where you were, where you are today. That bridge, you grew a lot in that time. And there's things you want to cherish from the past, but you can't go back. I'm sitting here in my 1990s looking grunge get up with Janet Jackson t-shirt on. And I love it. I love the 80s, 90s. I love the 70s, what I remember of them. So we need to use what we learn about ourselves from the way we experience nostalgia, and we need to express our emotions that we weren't allowed to express back then. Because we all know, if we're Gen X, we know that we really didn't have anyone that allowed us to tell them our feelings and to get that emotional support back then. If you did, you were few and far between, and you were very blessed. But, don't let it hold you up. What I'd like for you guys to do is tell me what triggers nostalgia for you. What kind of thing? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this dive into nostalgia and the science of nostalgia, I would love it if you give me a like on this video. I would love it more so too if you would subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and even share it with someone that you think might enjoy it. Anyway, I love you guys. You guys are awesome. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.